Hey fellow fraud fighters, I'm Jimmy Fong, CCO at SEON, and welcome to the Cat and Mouse podcast. SEON is fortunate to work with businesses such as the likes of Revolut, Nubank and Patreon in the fight against fraud. But with this podcast, we want to provide a comfortable space for people to talk about the daily challenges, topics on the horizon, and ultimately give us all a better insight into the mindset of fraudsters. And with that, on with the show. So I want to have a really big welcome to Lloyd Temple, who's joining us over from just outside DC in the East Coast there. Lloyd, a big welcome to the SEON Cat and Mouse podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Fantastic. Now, Lloyd, your current role is financial crimes investigator over at TikTok. And previous to that, I think it was really interesting in our pre-chat with yourself, and we'd learned about a very storied history over at the Homeland Security investigations. And so because of that, I think that's giving you an unbelievable kind of background experience into kind of fraud throughout the US, but I'm sure in wider geographies. So absolutely delighted to have you on to kind of jump into some of those lessons learned as a fraud fighter.
Sure, love to. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm not sure, hope to live up to that. But yeah, I retired about 2 years ago from working for Homeland Security investigations. I worked there in various iterations for about 28 years, and it was a great career. I was very fortunate to have it. Life with HSI, as we call it, was is diverse, busy, interesting, and collaborative. I would definitely frame it in that fashion. I was very fortunate to either investigate firsthand or supervise pretty much nearly every type of investigation we conduct, ranging from wide range of financial crimes, money laundering schemes, narcotics smuggling, IPR theft, bulk cash smuggling, government benefit fraud, dark web crimes, customs and trade fraud, human smuggling and trafficking, and a few more. I was also really fortunate that my career took me all over the United States. So I traveled all over the country, northern border, southern border, big cities, small cities, all around. I was able to work on the East Coast, worked on the West Coast, which was really super fascinating and very illuminating. Also got a chance to hit the Middle East, Europe, Central and South America. Our mission, our investigative mission, is closely tied to the borders and the criminal organizations that seek to exploit them. And it was a very, very interesting and rewarding career. The one great thing about sort of what I'm doing now is what I did for a long time was very mission oriented, very predicated upon working with some outstanding people. It's about the team that you surround yourself with and the team you contribute towards, in my opinion, in law enforcement. I think that's a global sense. That's what we believe. So, to advance any large scale investigation, you need to really be somebody who wants to collaborate with a wide and diverse set of teammates. And I work closely with pretty much every federal law enforcement agency you can imagine. I'm super fortunate for that, local and state police and international law enforcement as well.
Amazing storied history there. And I know even in the pre-chat, there was a few sub-points that even hinted at around kind of what you learned around, you kind of mentioned it, around money laundering or cash moving around the country. Yeah. Curious if there's kind of any anecdotal stories from those hard-fought days there.
Sure. It's hard to kind of zone in on one story. It's like asking me to pick out my favorite child. So I'm not going to quite pick out one story. Maybe I'll give you a few that are kind of fraud centric that I think sort of help influence my worldview and how, and it also kind of dovetails nicely with what I'm doing presently within TikTok. I used to be a group supervisor in our Seattle office, and I ran an investigative task force there. And that was comprised of local law enforcement from Seattle Police Department, Washington State Patrol. We also had numerous federal and Port of Seattle Police Department as well. I don't want to forget anybody. And also a wide range of other federal law enforcement, obviously my agency. And we also had Customs and Border Protection, the Postal Inspection Service, U.S. Secret Service. And then we partnered pretty closely with many other agencies, including the IRS, DEA, FBI, you name it. And we also had Secret Service as one of our partners as well. So I think one thing that instant to the fraud world that you can certainly empathize with is it was a very sad case, but it definitely it was pretty alerting to see what's going on in the world. And I worked a romance trunk fraud scheme whereby we got a complaint from somebody who's a little bit up in the age, new to the dating world, after a long period away from dating, and they got roped into a trunk fraud scheme where they were dating somebody considerably younger than them online. I can't remember the name of the dating website. And it just unfolded from there in a very rapid and tragic fashion. And whereby, the person who coerced this person into the fraud was saying, my father used to be in the oil industry. He has a trunk full of cash that's been seized by authorities in another country. Can you please help me get it released? Fraudulent email headers used to mimic the customs agency of another foreign country, and ask for wires right away to help release this trunk fraud matter. And and then there's an initial request for money, then a follow-up request for money, fraudulent documents out, flowing unfortunately quite rapidly. And so we investigated rapidly, and I was concerned because the victim we were talking to was not believing that was a fraud. They thought something was suspicious, but so like, well, we need to hop on this right away. So within a day, there was a international bank certificate of deposit. It was bogus. Proved that right away. Took it right to the bank branch. There was a bogus West Virginia birth certificate. Proved that right away. Luckily, there was good collaboration in there, and sort of contacting those other agencies. And he still had difficulty sort of comprehending that this person that he loved couldn't be real. And there's I do have empathy for the victims of these schemes, because I do think the social engineering and the con and the deceit that these organizations are very good at. They're very good at manipulating people, especially a lot of older people too, who are not as adroit with the technology and the websites, and I think there's, so it's something that was definitely gave me a sense of this needs to be protected and investigated. Unfortunately, once as you well know, once those funds are gone, they're gone, because they move quickly to many different countries. But it's something but many other cases I certainly enjoyed. I think you would enjoy this. We had a financial fraud case with the Internal Revenue Service in Seattle. And it's always good to take down those who are kind of living high on the hog. And the subject that we arrested at the time was living in a penthouse apartment, costing him about $25,000 a month. He had a Ferrari, he had a Mercedes, he had another very high-end automobile, and his scam was pretty devious. He purchased large supplies of iPhones on 4 different credit cards. He received the iPhones, then he resold those iPhones for profit, of course. But his scam was that he called the credit card company and said, "Hey," and Apple, and said, "I received these iPhones, but inside each one of the boxes was a ceramic tile that was approximately the size of the iPhone. So somebody ripped me off in this." And he did it. That's one time, right? Unfortunately, the credit card company reversed the charges. So Apple was responsible for a large chunk of money. And then he did the same thing again. He tried to scam another large-scale shipping company. Well, instead of using glass tiles, he shipped phones in pumice stone, and he said, like bricks, and he used that as a scam too. And the fortunate thing was investigators were able to trace his spending to a local hardware store. And we used some sort of creative surveillance techniques to scope out some of his activity as well. And so he got arrested and he got sentenced. And restitution was made. So it's pretty amazing, unfortunately.
Yeah, that creativity, Lloyd, that some folk go to there. So was there collusion with the retailer as well? Because he had to like sub in somehow these iPhone approximate weighted kind of substitutes into the box or so.
Correct. We never got a sense that there was any collusion or any inside man helping out the job. It was certainly, and the interesting thing was the actor who was doing these kind of criminal deeds was a very smart guy,
Right.
totally able to make a decent salary.
Right.
But, I guess making money and not paying taxes on it, and fraud on top of fraud is appealing to some. It's unfortunate because a bank got victimized in this too, because he had a bunch of bogus credit lines that he obtained from a bank, and then that was very harmful to that bank. And so the insidious nature of these kinds of crimes it's very serious and something we all need to be wary of. I mean, the scope of fraud in the United States and worldwide is the numbers are kind of staggering, and it keeps getting worse year over year, it seems. Particularly, I think, over the last bit with everybody at home, everybody online in the last 3 odd years. But, like in the United States, for instance, it's estimated that over 50% of Social Security numbers are compromised.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's an estimate, but and is it more? I don't know. The dark web, look how prolific that is, and how easily you can purchase breeder documents, false passports, credit card numbers in bulk, logons, you name it. In fact, I read in one of your SEON reports that credit card fraud will be $38.5 billion by the year 2027. That's a huge number. Secret Service, here in the United States, from the Paycheck Protection Program, for all the COVID unemployment related matters.
Yeah,
they think that fraud's worth more than $100 billion. Business email compromises in a 3-year period, according to the FBI, from 2000. This is just from 2016 to 2019. So, that's only a 3-year snapshot. Over $26 billion of business email compromise, and I think that's over 170 odd countries. So, the fraudsters are busy, and it takes a concerted and coordinated and consistent effort to attack those folks.
Even Lloyd, those two kind of anecdotal stories, they kind of get in my mind a couple of things going. Is one is the psychology of it, the psychology of what that fraudster is doing and how they purposely exploit vulnerable situations where, quite frankly, it plays to that human psychology of where it does make sense. And even on that one where you mentioned around the trunk kind of fraud, it's a variation of some old school classic kind of frauds, but it's the same principle how it's kind of hooked in, and it's based on emotion and etc. So definitely what it triggers is definitely the psychology behind it. And then you said the second thing around ingenuity and quite frankly, really creative means, right? Like these are absolutely smart, intelligent human beings. Where in another parallel story, they would have been your colleague, but instead, by whatever set of circumstances, it just so happens that this is what they're looking to kind of exploit and kind of make their life with for the short term, at least.
I thought it was very educational and very interesting. I listened to one of your podcasts yesterday while doing some yard work, and it was very your interview with one of the fraudsters, subject A, I think is anonymous A, and listening to him talk, or I assume him or her, whatever it was, talk, and it was how technically adept he was, how well he knew the technology that was being used. I mean, clearly somebody who has experience within either the financial industry or somebody who clearly has experience in the computer industry. This is not somebody who just randomly started doing this. This is somebody who's educated within the industry. So it's these folks are they're motivated by profit, and it's supersized and enabled by the internet these days. You can they can attack things at scale now, which is very disconcerting.
Yeah, the worrying thing for me, Lloyd, is that is absolutely kind of my takeaway as well, is just how adept a lot of, and how professional. I always use the analogy of just like we are a tech startup, on their side, they look at this like a complete business, right? In terms of all the professionalization, the work ethic, the creativity, the planning, the preparation that makes a good tech startup absolutely exists on the other side as well, as an adversary attacking kind of a legit organization. But the thing that scares me is more a trend towards the dumbing down of these crime as a service kind of technologies, where before you might need to know a bit of coding, how to be effective with JavaScript or SQL, but actually a lot of that's dying away. And it's as long as just like you can kind of build a website in 30 minutes with amazing platforms now available on the clear web. The same thing's happening on the fraud end, which is that's the really worrying trend. Is now you can be smart but with no IT background and can leverage these kind of tools as well, because someone's building a no-code version of many of these kind of tools and exploits available as well. I wanted to bring it back to your conversation around the impact of organized crime in all of this. I think I'd love to hear kind of what were some takeaways from your experience, and kind of how that maybe on the fraud end kind of supersized everything from that side.
Yeah, I think in general, I think one trend I saw towards the end of my career is the polycriminality of a lot of large scale criminal organizations. They're not just doing one crime; they're doing multiple crimes. So, like for instance, I remember investigating or being involved in investigation of a pretty widespread ATM skimming operation of some folks. I mean, they were all over the country, doing it all over the United States, but they weren't just involved in that. There were implications. They were involved in human smuggling, human trafficking, large scale asylum fraud, fraudulent applications to procure immigration benefits, government benefit fraud, sort of trying to get welfare fraud as well. So it's not just one thing, it's multiple. I think these organizations will go after whatever is low, sort of perceived as low hanging fruit. And the sentencing guidelines for these crimes, unfortunately, are not quite as robust as other crimes that are you see. And for obviously there's a difference between white collar fraud like this and a crime of violence, but the scale and the scope of these activities, I think, definitely call for hopefully large sentences when they're caught. But it's they are recidivist by nature. If they're going to do it once, they'll do it twice. It's most of the folks that I've seen within our world, they have been down the path of criminality before.
That makes total sense there. I think a couple of kind of points I completely agree with. And from the lessons learned there, I know we talked in the pre-chat as well, Lloyd, around if you like, in terms of fraud and online fraud, are any pointers our audience, as you know, are kind of our fraud fighters out in the field there and trying to help protect against online fraud? Curious to kind of any kind of takeaway tips, like flags to look out for that you kind of see are recurring patterns, if you like.
I think some of the more important things that I would want to convey is I think it's vital for people to BYOB, be your own bank. Take advantage of all the technology out there. Sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming, all these services provided by banks and credit cards companies, but be your own KYC and your own transaction monitoring. Look at your bank balance and the transactions on a weekly basis. It's all at your fingertips. You need to take advantage of all the transactional alerts and technology that banks offer, whether it's, hey, an online purchase was made on this date, this time. It's provided to you instantaneously. Take advantage of all of that technology that's out there. I think enrollment in a credit monitoring service, particularly here in the States, I'm sure many other places, I think is very helpful. You should take advantage of those transactional alerts. offered by that, because of the scope and scale of identity theft is so large. I think it's very important to do that. I think one crucial thing as well. There's a few other points I would say. Slow down. I think the speed of information is moving quicker than ever, and it's not a race. If you don't recognize that name or number on your texts or your emails, don't click the links. There's no need for a rapid response if you don't know who is on the other end. Be on the lookout for your older relatives and your neighbors. Make sure they're aiming to be cyber smart and practice very healthy cyber habits. And I think you need to protect yourself, use all the security updates on your phone, your computer regularly. You don't want to be victimized through that. Be aware of the social engineering tactics, again, like we've discussed throughout the call. Verify as best you can. Look, go back to the business website. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I think it's also about, in TikTok, we also want to partner with the best people we can to educate the consumer. I think you are your best protection against fraud. You, the person in the mirror. Our employees are our best protection against fraud. And I think it's important that we partner with smart people who are in the fraud landscape. We've been really fortunate to partner with like the Fraudology, Frank on Fraud, Brett Johnson, the internet godfather on fraud, and many others in your company. I'm probably missing one or two, but I think those partners in the internet, ITRC, Identity Theft Resource Center, has been a very great advocate for us in trying to evangelize what's happening out there, and to make sure people are aware of the scams that are perpetrated throughout, or could be potentially perpetrated. So it's good to educate the consumers. There's a lot of information out there, Jimmy. It's just a matter of take advantage of it, use it the right way.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. Be your own bank as an awesome takeaway as an individual as well. And so you that brings us on to your adventure with TikTok and helping to support around fraud and cybersecurity awareness and education. So for yourself, Lloyd, especially with that deep experience and such varied, like on the field to operative to research to kind of seeing big impact as you did. Curious to kind of what made you lead up to the TikTok adventure for you personally?
Great question. So when I was looking for sort of the next chapter or the next challenge, I certainly was interested in joining a company where the mission was very important, and it's clear to me that TikTok as a company is seeking to build trust through transparency. I see that people that I interviewed with throughout the interview process, they're all very sharp, industry experts, very committed, very hardworking, very believing in that collaborative process. So those are all really things that I was looking for in my next chapter. We want to ensure that there's a safe environment for people of all ages. Our community guidelines are constantly updated to make sure we try our best to stay ahead of problems that are out there. It's an exciting place to work. There's a lot of work ahead of us, and we have over 1 billion users right now, right? So it's going to grow, and just the challenge of working something that's growing is I've found very enticing, and the corporate culture I found to be very appealing as well.
That's awesome. And you touched upon education being so critical to that as well. Do you want to tie it into, so you've got an in-app campaign that TikTok's helping to kind of get the word out on for its amazing user base?
Yes, there's a hashtag Be Cyber Smart, and I follow that. You'll see some very good content out there on the videos relative to that. Even our CSO, for instance, does like a phishing video about sort of explaining what phishing techniques are. And, it's also the other thing that I've always found appealing is that, TikTok's kind of, we like to say we want to protect the last sunny corner of the internet. We wanted to keep it fun. We want to keep it collaborative. And so we have lots of resources on our website about how to protect yourself, safety measures, reminders for parents on how to protect their kids, how to link up your accounts and make sure all sorts of education materials are out there. And it's something that's not a one-time effort; it's a continual effort. We want to make sure we help people. We have a cyber security awareness week. We participate in that. We recently participated in Valentine's Day to make people aware of romance scams with some really creative content from all sorts of partners and creators. So yeah, I think we're going to be forward leaning. I know we're going to be forward leaning on this for a long time.
That's awesome. So as you know, Lloyd, we are called the SEON Cat and Mouse podcast, and we're always curious with our guests in the kind of constant fight from professional fraud fighter against the professional fraudster. Who do you think is the cat and the mouse in that scenario?
I like to envision the fraud fighter as a cat, but not just your domesticated, sort of happy, fat and happy cat. I kind of like to think of a fraud fighter as like an alley cat, tough, street smart, hungry, and eager. So that's kind of the way I envision the fraud fighter model of cat. And it's a constant battle, but I think that's the way I like to leave it.
Love that, Lloyd. Well, TikTok sound like they are super lucky to have you helping them on raising that awareness and helping to fight fraud on that side. Lloyd, I want to thank you for your generosity of time. It's been great having you on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your time, Jimmy. Great to meet you, and hopefully we'll do it again in person sometime.